Wait, you guys, now it's time for the good stuff. Please welcome the unstoppable, the unflappable, the utterly brilliant, our own Puffles! Woo!
Thank you, Crystal. What an introduction. So hopefully some of you out there know me already, but my real name is Sophia. Everyone knows me as Puff, though. It is an affectionate nickname. And I have the absolute pleasure of being one of the 3 directors here at Three-Sided Cube. And for those of you that don't know, our mission at Three-Sided Cube is to change millions of lives for the better. And we do that through designing and building what we call tech for good. So think apps and platforms that help people and the planet. Okay, so I guess because of our mission, it means that we get the absolute privilege of partnering with world-changing organizations. So just naming some of our clients, the American Red Cross, some of the UN agencies, World Resources Institute, and many, many, many other brilliant NGOs and mission-led businesses. So AI, okay, so here at Three-Sided Cube, we are AI first, but not AI for the sake of it, but AI that basically earns its place. So for us, if it helps teams move faster, reach more people, or reduce risk, and of course, generate impact, then we're all in. And as Crystal mentioned at the start, this session sits on our 3rd round of AI, what a mouth twister that is, AI adoption pulse check across the purpose-led sector, which is really, really exciting. We've been doing this for about 3 years now. And I've had the absolute pleasure of seeing the results every time these pulse checks are done. And I think it's been utterly fascinating to watch the needle move. And Crystal kind of said it, it's in the title, but this year's headline is explicitly clear. 89% of orgs are using AI. So adoption is in full throttle. But what does that mean now? Okay. So that's why we're here today. We want to talk about where AI can genuinely help and where it doesn't, and when better data, process, or other tech should win. Okay. We're going to try and keep it really practical, talk about real life examples, any like simple decision rules. And I hope to end this conversation today with one move that we can try in the next 30 days to really make a difference. I am joined by the most amazing panelists. We have 3 incredible people here today, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Puff, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're coming in from. So my name is Paul Smith. I'm the Chief Information Officer at Amnesty International. We are the largest human rights organisation in the world, about 10 million people, and across about 150 countries and territories. And it's really great to be here today.
And Addie?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Addie Achan. I'm calling in from Sandy, Utah, and I'm the founder of the Kaleidoscope Project. It's a part consultancy, part research initiative on understanding how to best fund responsible tech with data. And yeah, super excited to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Addie. And Meet.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meet. Like I said to the speakers earlier, nice to meet you, Meet. So please feel free to refer me as that. My pronouns are he, him. I'm joining in from Mumbai, India, and I work as a strategic innovation and AI lead at World Wildlife Fund at the International Secretariat. WWF is also I think as Paul added context, is one of the largest conservation organizations, and currently we span over 85 countries.
Amazing. So it's not only amazing that we have these 3 incredible organizations and people here today, you've all got some incredible experience in this space and, very, very credible experience. But we have a truly global panel. So Mumbai, Utah, UK, and I'm joining from the US today as well. So some amazing global presence there. Thank you so much to our panelists. And I think I just want to give a shout out to those of you in the audience. As Crystal said at the start, please keep the chat flowing and line up your questions. You have 3 brilliant brains to pick here today, so please do make the most of them. And I think that's enough to be said now. I think let's start getting into those discussion questions. So I'm going to do the same deal for each one of the questions I have. Short story, clear takeaway. And if you can, okay, and this may not always be possible, but one human measure, minutes saved, errors reduced, people reached for each and for each one of your answers. And again, chat and keep those questions coming through in the chat, and we'll weave them in when we can, and when there's relevant space. So first question, where AI helps and where it doesn't. Can you, and I'm going to come to you, Paul, first, sorry. Sorry to pick on you. But one task AI has helped improve with, and if you've got a metric of value or anything to share around that, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Puff. So I could probably talk about this for a little while, but I'm going to zero in on probably quite an obscure example that we learned about here. So for those of you that don't know what Amnesty really does, we write a lot of reports, and you can imagine some of the reports we write are probably about some of the hairiest subjects in the world. So it can be quite broad, it can be quite deep, and quite complex. That means we have to write a lot of footnotes to cite sources. We did a little bit of experimentation with some of our researchers, and we found that on average, a single researcher creates about 384 footnotes a year, which is quite a lot, really, which takes a year about 30 and a half hours. So about two and a quarter minutes to create and about 2.5 minutes to check each one was kind of the feedback we were getting. So we're playing around with some Copilot agents for footnote creation, and we've realized we can half that time. So when you scale that up, it equates to about 1,500 hours a year saved across our research community. A really small thing for a very specific task, but scaled up, huge saving. And an improvement in quality and consistency as well. So I thought I'd share that one.
That's amazing. And talk to us about the experimentation. Did it take long to try and get that into play?
Yeah, I mean, the approach we're taking to these sorts of technologies is to step into them cautiously and as a kind of a co-created team between kind of tech bods and end users. And we're kind of all learning and playing with it together. We have, quite frequent stand-ups. We've got a certain set of use cases we want to walk through. So we step into these things carefully. And it's literally a lot of, have you tried this? Have you done that? What did you find? And we kind of just lots and lots of iteration. And what we find is the more specific the use case, the easier it is to generate outcomes from it, as opposed to, really kind of 3-page long prompts and these kinds of things. And if you're using agents, you can institutionalize the thing that you want to do, and they become really easy to refine over time.
I can see both Addie and Meet nodding their heads there. Do one of you want to jump in? I'm going to go to you, Addie. I can see you nodding first, but
Sure. Yeah. No. I think it's just like a really like it speaks a lot to the sort of points that I was thinking of, where like I was just thinking that AI has really helped me a lot with so much work around data. As I mentioned, a lot of my work is helping funders who want to fund responsible tech or like just generally social good organizations with understanding like what are the right ways to do that, and that requires a lot of data, obviously, to do so. Like you can't have a discussion about AI without data, since AI is powered by that. So it's really helped me on like an individual level with one, and should be used very carefully, but with generating data, at least for like sample use cases or test use cases. Like for example, if I'm running a workshop for funders and I want to show them a sample data set of various grantees they have, then I can use AI to generate that. And something that would be very formulaic and take hours to have at magnitude to get 50 different examples can now be done in like 5 minutes. But I think what's even more interesting on the data sense is its ability to really understand data and pull insights from it. So when I'm getting feedback from so many people, whether that's qualitative and quantitative, AI can really help me understand trends like very immediately, instead of like trying to do some really heavy data analysis by myself. Again, it's like a 2-hour task that can now be done within 5 minutes. And of course, it's important to check that, but still that efficiency is really clear. And I think it works even, it can be taken to another level. Like one of the organizations that I work with on the not-for-profit front is an organization called Vigilant, and they use AI to help detect early stage blindness just via using like machine learning technology on smartphones. And just by taking a picture of an eye they're able to detect early stage blindness at 94% accuracy, which is actually 4% higher than doctors. And yeah. And like the real unlock is it's like, it's not even there to necessarily replace doctors. It's deployed in places in rural India where people don't even have access to those types of resources. So that's obviously going to require a bit of engineering, but like even on the sort of like individual experimentation level, it goes to show that like if you have the right data, AI can really like be directed to have great insights.
It's so encouraging to hear some of the more positive stories. I must admit, you know, every day, like I wake up and you hear some real horror stories, but equally there are some amazing stories that come out of this as well. But I love shining a light on the positive stuff coming through. Meet, what about you?
No, yeah, I think super interesting to hear from Paul and Addie, and thank you for this question. And I often kind of always take a step back to kind of talk about like AI is fundamentally a tool, right? And like I think often people forget AI has, like when I talk from an environmental standpoint, be working at WWF, we often talk to our leadership. We say, you know, AI has existed. It was first being used in the environmental space since 1950s. Yeah, it was not the same chat GPT or perplexity what we are talking about today, but AI, artificial intelligence as a concept has been used for a long time, whether we talk about weather forecasting or creating climate models. So I often say like, you know, where AI helps is in areas where it can amplify human capacity. And rather than thinking about where it can replace human capacity, how can it amplify our capacity? So at WWF, we have had tons of case studies, and AI has been long part of our conservation journey. And some interesting ones I can share is we have a project called Forest Foresight. If folks are interested, can check it out, which is often we talk about how to do mitigation measures when deforestation happens. So Forest Foresight is actually a tool which we have developed which supports in doing predictive analytics to actually predict before deforestation is going to happen. And we have tested out in some cases, and we have found, sadly, we were not able to take mitigation measures, but we wanted to see if this tool actually works, and we were able to find where deforestation was predicted, it did happen. And we're using multiple parameters and tuning our models to get more and more accurate over there. So it's very interesting to see. We have also gotten the community and the people in the loop to be able to understand how can we be collectively working together to protect our nature. We have also been seeing examples um, such as camera trapping. It's within wildlife space, it's super important to be able to trace our species and what's really happening, especially when there's incidents such as wildfires, such as the bushfires in Australia. And usually our camera traps take millions and millions of images, which can take months and months for people to sit down, manually look through, what is the damage, what are the species we are detecting. AI does that now within a span of days or sometimes hours. Or so I think that changed the game in terms of, not just looking at efficiency as a word, but it's about we're looking at more in terms of ecosystems protected and lives being saved. So I think that's why I see AI is helping definitely.
I think coming back to Paul, I think you mentioned earlier the specific use cases, and remembering that AI is just a tool. It enables us to do things faster, more efficiently, whatever it helps enable. But it's quite often it's not the silver bullet that everyone thinks it's going to be. It's not going to solve all of our problems. And what has been really interesting over the 3 years that we've been running these adoption pulse checks is people can talk about the successes and a brilliant impact that it can be having, which is great. But people are really nervous to talk, and they're very hesitant to talk publicly about successes, but also about failures, or where people have decided, actually, no, AI is not right for that project. And that's fine, right? But they're very hesitant and nervous to talk about this. And we were here at 370Q, we were like, okay, well, how do we overcome this? How do we, be really honest and transparent? And I'm gonna And our marketing team, I'm sure, are going to love the fact that I'm bringing this up. But I think we blogged it. We talked about it publicly, that we set ourselves a challenge of like, can we create a new website in a day using the latest and greatest AI tools? Is that possible? We failed. It got us so far, and we made really good progress quite quickly. But we didn't do it in a day. And it was really interesting because then we were like, okay, what about a week? Like, what can we achieve in a week? And then it was like, what about a month? And I think in the end, it probably took a couple of months to do something. It still saved time. Like if you look at our website today and what you're seeing, that is a result of using AI tools, but it wasn't an easy process for a number of different reasons, whether there was resistance of maybe some people not wanting or not feeling confident in using certain tools, because these are new emerging tools that are coming out. I appreciate AI is not new technology, but some of the latest tools coming out, some of the latest software, it's hard. And regardless of whether or not you work in tech, there's always new things, and change is probably the one constant in this space right now. Can you name any, any examples of like a moment that you said no to AI, and maybe elaborate on why you said no? And I'm going to come back to you, Paul, because I started with you.
Yeah, happy to. And you won't be surprised to hear, given who Amnesty are, that most of our no's are grounded in ethics. So early iterations of our policy are prohibiting certain use cases for AI. And that's where they could generate, unpalatable risk for the organization around credibility, unless there is sufficient, individual human oversight to check inputs or outputs. And that could be anything from generating official organizational statements or public responses, sensitive support or person at risk interactions and comms, producing legal documents, generating or augmenting content that depicts children, or anything externally facing in the audio-visual space, which draws on intellectual properties of Indigenous people. So it's those sorts of things which we think are ethically, really sensitive for us, could really cause us a lot of issues in the credibility and reputation space. The other things we want to protect for the moment and step into cautiously. And I'm sure we'll add to that list. I'm sure we'll even start to step into spaces of prohibiting specific technologies. But what do you do instead? I think, but what that's lent us to do is, what's the issue? Focus back on the issue. What is it you're trying to solve? Is it a people or process problem instead, actually? Is there some friction that's coming from that space? Because we're looking, again, like we do, at technology as a solution, but is the issue grounded in people or process still? So going back to basics that we all know. So yeah, a couple of examples there.
It's funny how, in this day and age, we forget to go back to the basics. And sometimes it's very easy to get swept up in, new shiny tools and the buzzwords and the jargon and the trends. Like, I think anyone can be guilty and get swept away in that. But actually, I think there's a good outcome there in terms of just going back to the basics. Is it
yeah
people?
And we're lucky, Puff, I mean, these tools are great, but we've got some of the best people in the world that work for us that do what they do. The tool could learn from them, frankly. So we do tend to rely on your own capability and have a bit more trust in yourself as well.
Yeah, it's that confidence, isn't it?
Yes.
It's the confidence. What about you, Addie? Have you got an example of where you said no?
Yeah, no. And I mean, first, I just think it's such a good question, because I think like one of the biggest barriers to AI adoption is that trust gap, where oftentimes like these solutions are good, but people are just so hesitant to use it. And I think a big way to overcome it is to be transparent about limitations. So I'll go back to actually my data example, because again, I think like AI really requires effective data to run really well. So a tool that I built previously was an AI policy builder. And it's a bit meta, but like an AI tool that would help generate an AI policy. But in order to be able to do that, you needed to input training data of like other AI policies. So it had patterns to recognize in frameworks. And I suppose like this data collection piece, it's almost going back to the basics. Like, I think that's the piece that really needs to remain very human. I know like we even had a question around like the ethics around data collection when it comes to understanding like how to get valuable data from communities. And I think that's a really critical, important piece when addressing trust. But then there's also maybe a temptation to be like, well, AI is so good at generating things. Can't it generate data for me? And there's this push to synthetic data that I think can be used tastefully in ways, but like it should also be very careful with usage. Because I mean, I hope it's okay for me to say this word, but like there's this idea about the shitification of AI, or even AI slop, where if you feed AI training data that AI itself has generated, then like, are we kind of missing the point around like, you know, it's supposed to be reflecting human values and humanity. So even though it might be easier to generate data for models to train on, I think being really intentional about collecting data in ethical ways, and even if it's smaller, limited amounts of data, it'll provide like more effective tools than just trying to like throw random AI generated slop to train the models themselves.
I think that's a really good point. And Addie, thank you for that lovely segue into, I think, Daniel's question on and this goes to all three of you panelists, and feel free to jump in, but do you experience conflicts between AI data collection ethics and your organization's mission statement? And how do you navigate that? Does any one of you want to jump in and answer that? Paul's nodding his head.
100%. You know, we have, as an organization, particular perspectives regarding big tech and how they do what they do and the monopolies they have, but also how these models are trained, not respecting the rights of indigenous peoples, not respecting intellectual properties, all of those good things. And as Addie was talking, I was smiling because have you ever come across the photocopier analogy related to AI? Which is, if you take a picture, you put it through a photocopier, you take the output, then put the output into the photocopier, and you keep taking the output and putting it in. Over time, that photocopy becomes white. It loses all fidelity because it's summarizing and summarizing and summarizing, creating copies of copies. And I think that's a really great analogy for AI. And I think, as Addie was saying, feeding it its own data, it's the same kind of thing. You lose all fidelity. So yeah, I was smiling about that. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at some of the outputs our organizations produced, you'll see that the kind of conflict that we could easily get drawn between internal aspirations to go tech and actually the change we want to see in the world and the rights we want respected.
That's brilliant. And I'm definitely going to be using that analogy moving forwards. Bringing it back to that question of an example of where you've said no. What about you, Meet? Do you have an example of where you've said no?
Yeah, I think I would just go back to what Paul mentioned, right? Like as a mission-driven organization, like principles and values always come first, and there are certain things very much similar to what Paul mentioned. There are certain things which are clearly a no, and like as simple as there were early excitement and attempts when we saw like AI can generate images, but a big fundamental no was, we don't want to generate images of the nature and of the animals. And at the same time, I think one thing which becomes fundamental when we do conservation work, it's like you're pretty much working with communities, you're working with so many stakeholders involved. And often, yes, we know AI has the capability to predict a lot of things based on, as Addie mentioned, the input data. But AI is not great at predicting trust or cultural nuances, because we do know, which kind of relates to the question which I believe Daniel asked and what Paul has been responding to. Like, we don't really know as of now that what is really happening behind the scenes. Like, there are a lot of claims, there's a lot of reports, there's a lot of understanding, but there's always this lack of complete information of how these models are being built. So the cultural nuances are always missing. So we cannot completely rely on AI to replace the relationships we hold to be able to do the work we do. And that again goes back, again, just a parallel to Paul. We have great people. We have people who work on ground, and we do want that presence to still stay there, and that relationships and trust to be staying there, because we can't just replace anything and everything with AI. So kind of very much focusing on what are those high impact potential areas where AI does have the capability of optimizing and becoming efficient. But there are certain things which are clearly a red light for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have had another question come in from Carly. So they've asked, how are you folks navigating getting leadership buy-in for AI literacy and innovation? So do any of you have any tips or tricks here up your sleeve, and what maybe share what's worked well for you, if anything? I'm going to let you, one of you dive in. Whoever wants to dive in.
I'm happy.
I can maybe. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, a couple of things really. I mean, one is I've got a pretty good leadership team. You know, they're out exploring this stuff for themselves, hearing from others in their own circles, and talking to people that they know about what they're doing in their own organisation. So they are generating an understanding and a demand for this stuff in their own right. But as the organisation that we are, show and tell goes a long way in an organisation like ours. We can talk about it, which all sounds very theoretic, but here's something we've done. Look at this. You'll either say it's horrific or you'll say it's great, but at least we have a starting point for the discussion, which is typically a good way to deal with stakeholders anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about you, Meet? You look like you were going to step in as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can kind of break it down in few steps. I think number one for us have my role, I think me stepping in has been a lot of bottom up movement creation inside WWF, because we did have a lot of mistrust of whether what we should do with this AI revolution, this AI movement. And a key thing has been kind of ensuring we kind of show that AI is something which has been used within the organization since a long time. And a lot of AI work is being done to the core of our mission to achieve better conservation outcomes. And a lot of our leadership didn't know about what's already happening since decades in the organization. So showcasing that again and again, that's not just about efficiency, it's helping us move closer to our mission. So kind of understanding, yes, it's very overwhelming, but kind of reducing that overwhelm to kind of show what AI really means to us. And second most fundamental thing has been, I would say the most important thing is building the shared language and literacy, because often people come with their own notions and their own thoughts of why AI does not make sense. So kind of putting a lot of efforts since the past 2 years of demystifying AI on a leadership level, on CEOs level, conservation directors, office to office. I've literally spent 1 year going office to office, all staff meetings to all staff meetings, to talking about this and bringing people on the same page, which was important, took a lot of time. And finally, kind of leveraging, we have created this huge community inside WWF, which is AI community of practice, which is really kind of bringing different levels of people of the organization together and the peer influence has really now shifted, where I'm at this point right now where our leadership has a larger buy-in to, there's been conversations on like, okay, how do we start thinking of advocacy around AI? How do we start thinking of what is our stances around AI? So people are leaning more into it, but it was a long work.
I think that's the thing. This stuff takes time. And I don't know, like sometimes I feel we live in a world where people aren't as patient as they used to be, and people have very high expectations and they want to achieve things very, very quickly. And the reality is, you know, typically when you're dealing with people and change, that takes time. And that's okay. But I think it's just being aligned with what or how much time you can and should invest in that, because, you know, it really can take quite a significant amount of time, which is investment, right? On both sides. Right, Carly, there's a few questions that we need to catch up with, but Carly had another question around impact measurement frameworks. Are there any frameworks that you would recommend? Because it may appear that that's something that they've been trying to figure out. Anyone want to jump in there? Go on, Addie. Come
Sure.
on.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a bit of self-promotion, but that's like actually a lot of the work that I am focusing on, like really trying to understand in a way, like social return on investment, specifically tied to like just attributed to an AI itself or an AI tool itself. So I am trying to like productize it into like an actual tool, but in the interim, you know, I love to just discuss it one-on-one. So, you know, definitely would love to reach out. But so my framework was sort of developed by my last role where I was at Fast Forward, and I was a bit of like a capital allocator where I evaluated over like 300 responsible tech and responsible AI solutions that are meant to serve people, and our whole focus is like what's going to create the most impact. So I got a good sense of like the 6 core foundations of like what a responsible tech or responsible AI solution looks like, and what are the sort of like at the next level, the execution layers for each of those foundations. And then I've also like, advised around 50 teams around like deploying those tech strategies to see what works and what doesn't, and have helped build a couple of things. And it's all to say that like each solution requires a bit of nuance, especially when it comes to measuring impact. But what's really helpful is like understanding human baselines upfront, and like defining expectations upfront around metrics, and using those as sort of like table stakes to compare what sort of changes you expect to see or want to see. I think that's been most helpful. But yeah, again, I am happy to like sort of share more about my work generally. But yeah, it's really like, I think another like really interesting piece is that some governments have really good frameworks around this stuff. Like I think in the US, there's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and their framework around responsible deployment even can help inform impact measurement. So those are things that I tend to look to as well.
Thank you, Addie. Really appreciate that. Meet, Paul, anything to add to that before I go on to the next question?
Sure. I mean, I can just build upon Addie. I feel like, especially, I think the impact measurement kind of differs so much across the kind of project where you're integrating AI, right? Like whether you're doing it for communications, whether you're doing it for conservation impact or fundraising. And one of the most, to be very frank, like, to be honest, like one of the key indicators we are currently focusing a lot more on, this is not something which is standardized, but I'm observing across multiple offices, is very focusing on time which is being saved to be able to allow more and more people to be able to do the job we need to do. So kind of, how much time are we able to save on the task which is consuming a lot of time. So that's been one of the main factors which we are looking at. There's definitely a struggle in terms of like seeing, ideally we would also like to start seeing, when we talk about environmental impact of AI, there's also this whole Pandora's box, which is, not yet, people are still questioning on, but we also want to see when there is environmental impact of AI indeed, and there's impact of a lot of technology which we use on a day-to-day basis, but versus that negative impact which is out there, what is the environmental benefit we are able to generate while we use AI into some of our projects? I think that's the bigger question we're trying to ask ourselves, and we have set up like a small internal task force to investigate that further at this point, but currently kind of very focusing on the time being saved.
Amazing. And I think, the fact that you've got a small task force looking at that as well. And I think that's quite often one of the challenges when you have so many stakeholders and so many people involved. Actually, having quite a small task force can really help speed things up sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. Right, so we've got another question in, this time from Jean. And it feels like quite a chewy question. So, assuming that most of our organizations are working to create a better future for younger generations, how do you think about the ethics of using AI generally with regards to the potential issues it poses for younger generations? So in the environment, joblessness, tech addiction, just to name a few. How do we embrace AI while also working to mitigate against these downfalls? And that is quite a beefy question there, but do any of you have any thoughts on this? Go on, Paul. I like it. Paul puts his hand up for the difficult questions.
I'm happy to take a run at a couple of aspects of this. I think so. The first thing I always look at through this sort of question is the lens of the digital divide. What can AI and generative AI bring to the table that people that are otherwise without, which can be without access to education, without access to mentors, without access to knowledge, and what can that do for that? Because there's still so many young people in this country that don't have access to those things, right? I think someone said during COVID there are about 1 million children that didn't have a laptop to work remotely. So I think there's a real positive there for me in terms of closing that digital divide between the haves and the have-nots. So I think that's a positive thing. You know, I can't afford to go to university, but I can learn about a subject in my own way, at my own pace, etc., etc. So I think that's good. I think there's definitely a risk around the loss of, let's call them the junior roles, the entry-level roles. And because everyone's saying, the assistant roles are going, the interns are going, because actually we can just get a bot or AI to do something for us. That's a big risk that I don't think we've solved yet. But equally, we still need the experts of tomorrow. So that pipeline needs to be fed from somewhere. So will it completely replace those roles? Maybe not. Maybe it'll reduce them a little bit. In terms of tech addiction and environment, I mean, who knows? I mean, measure what it saves. I'm going to spend an hour on generative AI versus 8 hours scaring the website. I don't know in terms of the pros and cons there. People that are cleverer than me will be able to benchmark that much more efficiently than I can. But I like I say, I'll just settle on the digital divide piece and the opportunity there, then I'll shut up and pass to others.
Me, Addie, anything to add to that?
Sure, I'll hop in. But yeah, no, I think that Paul just said, like at the end around like finding the use cases and where AI is actually helping some of those issues can be really important. Like I've worked with a climate organization that uses AI for energy like optimization, and teams that use AI to help upskill college students and give them direct advice that's necessary. Or even, with tech addiction, a tool that can predict when you're like looking at inflammatory content and may need to break from your phone. So there's positive use cases out there, and I don't think it like means that we shouldn't we should disregard all the potential negative effects, because those are very real. In fact, I think really being having a movement to really like push forward, like, these concerns that people are having are necessary, because I think so much of AI innovation right now is about like optimizing a billionaire's portfolio and whatever is going to work best for them. But, the one thing that I think is maybe more powerful than money is like public opinion. And I think the more people are able to organize and express that these are real concerns, will hopefully put pressure in order for people to direct, like, if you think of AI as a resource, instead of directing it as a resource towards things that may not necessarily care about that end person or end user, instead directing it to use cases where it's actually helping these things, could be a really powerful way. It's a bit aspirational, I'll admit, but I think, that's sort of like my hope for how it gets addressed.
Thank you, Addie. That's awesome. And you know what? We have to be aspirational here. I think it's important to be, because otherwise I feel like there's too much focus on the doom and gloom and the negative side of things. And I think, it is nice. There's two sides to the coin. So it's nice to look on the other side and have that positive mindset. Right. Bringing it back. So, third iteration of the report, we're saying 89% are using AI. Wow, that's awesome. What do you think separates teams that are shipping real value from teams out there that are stalling right now with AI? And I appreciate that's quite an open question, but what are your thoughts? And I'm going to come to you, Meet.
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Of course. So let's say that, well, we know from the report, 89% of organizations are using AI, okay, in this tech for good space. What do you think separates teams that ship value, so that are actually achieving positive impact with AI, from teams that are stalling and having real challenge with it?
No, thank you for that. And I think this is a very this is a very interesting question, because I was recently this last summer at the AI for Good Summit, which was happening in Geneva, and this is like a big conversation out there. And one of the big factors was when we were talking about guardrails and like policies and governance of AI within mission-driven organizations. And often, the reason I'm giving this reference is often when we look at, there are a lot of teams in our organization currently experimenting with AI, but when we talk about a AI policy or governance coming into picture, there's always a fear of what is this going to restrict. And I think I've been observing a lot of beautiful conversations happening in our leadership of we don't want to look at guardrails as ways to restrict people, but how can we design guardrails which foster innovation within in ways which are responsible? Because I think this also connects to that question about youth, which Jean asked. Because like we as purpose-led organizations are kind of shaping the kind of digital ecosystems we want to create for the future. So kind of I feel like the team kind of what divides the teams which are kind of really progressing, who are focusing on guardrails or focusing on developing policies, but also focusing on these are policies we want to be in place to foster more innovation within the organization and not halt innovation. And I feel like there's a very big difference in how that governance is done within the organization. So I'll take a pause over there.
I love the way that you reframed guardrails there into looking at how, rather than restrict, like how we might be able to enable innovation. I love the reframing of that. I'd not thought about it like that before. What about you, Paul? Anything to add to that or to build on that?
In terms of what's made the difference, I think for us, I would say probably two things: co-designing with your frontline users, not doing tech to them, but involve them from day one, and by extension, learning together. And because we're all learning, right? This stuff's moving fast and it's pervasive. And we found that involving users from day one, we avoid building tools that were technically impressive but practically irrelevant. So they need to be useful and usable. And I think real results come from being user-centered at the heart and focusing on the problem behind everything. So understanding the pain, because together you'll build a better solution than either could on your own, and that will solve real bottlenecks. So we've had lots of success in cross-functional teams, open channels to learn together, ask silly questions, all that kind of stuff.
Beautifully put. And I could see Addie nodding to that as well. I do think that makes a huge difference. And I can't express like how many times it always comes back to the users, to the use case, making sure that we're actually, designing a solution that is really fit for purpose and that will be used. Because too often, and it still happens today, people are designing solutions for problems that they have never experienced or they don't really understand. Like, come on, let's go back to basics. Like, can you actually do that? Like, if you've never experienced or haven't made the effort to try and understand, an experience, then like, I don't know how you can get to a truly impactful product that people love to use. To be honest.
And I'm lucky. I work in an organization where, users, we work to empower users. So they will come to us and say, I found something and I've already solved it. Can I have this thing, please, in production? Which is great. It's where you want to be. So, we kind of delegate that out and they can do great things. But as an example, we've got a Viva Engage group with over 200 people in that are just interested in generative AI. And we ask questions, we have debates, we have arguments, we share things like successes, news articles. And that's just helped everyone to educate each other together. It's been really interesting.
Do you know what? I have to confess, we've done the same at Cube. We have a, it sounds really cliche, but we've got an AI Slack channel. And what I found really helped with the adoption within the agency, because AI is not just affecting the developers, it's affecting the designers, the project managers, QA, client success. It is affecting every single role. And actually what we noticed was when you have those innovators, right, you have the people that are like brave and they're actually experimenting and they're going through, but by sharing the use cases, the wins, the failures, all of the insights and the learnings in this channel, what we noticed was adoption throughout the agency was increasing. The more examples that were shared in this particular Slack channel, the more people were adopting it and using it and experimenting and playing and seeing what was possible. And it's that inspiration. It's seeing what is actually possible. A member of the team posted something the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, I could use that in this way and that's going to save me time. Selfishly, I was like, yes, that's amazing. Check the policy that I can do that. And that is, I'm checking all the guardrails and everything's good. But it's people, connecting with people and understanding, you know, the beauty that comes from that. What about you, Addie? Anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. I think I might go back a little bit to something Paul had said earlier around the guardrails. I thought that was like really interesting and powerful. Like an example I like saw in real life was IBM Watson. They tried to develop an AI tool to help farmers, and in the lab it worked really well. But then they actually went to deploy it. I think it was some parts of like rural Africa, and the farmers were totally not on board because it didn't fit their context or work style at all, and it totally failed. And again, it goes back to that thing I mentioned earlier around a lot of these solutions do work well, but you are missing that marketing or communication piece around like actually getting people on board. And then additionally, like I think even in regards to sort of like that internal enablement or just what types of like product principles work well in general, I think sometimes people rightfully view as AI allows like personalized recommendations at scale, which is true. But I think there also needs to be a recognition that that personalization is still a bit controlled by how you design it. So I think a lot of people, for example, they'll open up ChatGPT, they'll type something in and they'll be blown away with the results. But that's because they're fully controlling that input. And even why, you know, I like the kaleidoscope metaphor is I think AI is like a kaleidoscope where it like reflects different pieces of input into an output that makes sense to you. But if you're building a tool for other people and you are, you know, having an API call to a prompt that you yourself are designing, that may not necessarily reach their full reality. And that's sort of, I think, why sometimes people get disappointed or underwhelmed by AI results, even though builders themselves thought it was good, because again, it sort of goes back to that end user. And I think the best ways people have sort of like worked around it are finding really narrow use cases. I think it's especially, you know, we talked about agents. I think Paul brought it up before. Like that can be really helpful for agents too, like operating in a use case where, you know, that type of, I don't know, like maybe personal opinion difference may not differ too much, can be really critical. And then similarly, like going back to the guardrails, I think compared to other technologies, investing a lot of time upfront into defining like what is okay and what's not okay with the AI and designing around that can be helpful, where maybe that initial build time is a little bit longer, but ultimately that's like what's going to create a tool that has a longer lifespan, I think.
Amazing. Thank you, Addie. And so conscious of time, we have 10 minutes left. So I want to cover something before I just kind of touch on the report one last time. But we're going to call this your 30-day move. So if you had to make one change next month, okay, or whether it's you have to make the change or if you're recommending that one of the listeners here today make a change, whether that be experiment more, pause, tighten some guardrails, what would you do or recommend, and how would you know whether it had worked? And I'm going to come to you, Meet, first.
Yeah, I would say I think there's this, often there was this fear which I was noticing even within the organization is like go big or go home. Like, AI is here, we need to make it happen, we are going to fall behind all the other organizations. And then sometimes we go to spaces where other conservation orgs are there, other NGOs are there. So maybe we're okay, we're okay. And that's where I say like one small input I would say is like, it's okay to start small and start safe. um, and I would say like if you haven't started anywhere, or if you have, I would say pick pick some use cases, or pick some low risk use cases which can really help you solve something which are your biggest pain points. If you're with a team, sit with your team and figure out what are the biggest pain points of your team on a day-to-day basis in their projects, and see if does AI have the potential to solving that, which requires, of course, building some level of foundational literacy, because sometimes in teams and organizations we lack shared knowledge, shared language. you know Maybe knowledge is there but shared language is missing, and that is something which can be done through small spaces, doesn't need a lot of time. And the last thing I would say is, set guardrails early, because I know some people, I mean, that's my perspective. I know some people are saying let's experiment first, but sometimes experimentation can go really, really far away. So set some guardrails which fosters innovation, doesn't stop it. So I would say like maybe stop chasing hype and start chasing impact, because you can start small, play safe, and that's okay. That'll go a long way.
I think that's brilliant. And you know what? I don't think you're alone when you were describing that feeling at the start. I think there's a lot of organizations out there that probably feel nervous or panicked that they're falling behind the curve and they're not using it enough. And actually, quite often it's not the case. And what I have definitely noticed is those that they tend to be a lot quieter, which is why I feel like these webinars, these get-togethers are so important to shine a light on the reality of what's actually going on behind the scenes and how people and organizations feel about AI usage. I'm going to come to you, Addie, next for your next 30-day move. What would it be and why?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I might cheat a little, but I think if you're early stage or you're new to it, I think the biggest things would be one, making an AI policy. I think that can really help foster that knowledge sharing that Meet was talking about. And similarly, like just another plus one on Meet is like have an experiment that's centered around a low risk use case. I'd suggest like maybe timing yourself, how long it takes you to do yourself, and then start using AI and maybe give it a few shots, because, AI, it's a little bit like, you need to get your legs under you to really understand how to get the most out of it. But if you are already regularly using it, I'd say really think about what are like good knowledge bases or domains, like beyond just a task that you think like AI can be really helpful with. That can be really helpful with creating a custom tool for your organization where you upload documents that you're constantly referring to. Maybe it's your strategic plan and things like that. And then AI can sort of have that institutional knowledge to help guide outputs. And I feel like that's like sort of a great sort of relatively simple way to sort of take AI enablement to the next step.
And I will say, all of you, I think at some point in the conversation today have alluded to those specific small use cases. And the tighter that use case is, quite often, the more successful the outcome might be. And I think just giving a nod to outcomes there, like make sure that if you are going to venture in the space, or if you are doing a bit more in the space, you have those measures of success. And it's clear, like Addie, you gave a nod to like how long does it take to do something? Okay, well, maybe the success measure is I've reduced the time, like you, Paul, with your original example with the footnotes. I mean, amazing. That is so specific, that example, but it's brilliant, right? It's impactful and people are going to remember that. And I think that's how you start building the momentum. You start using those small but very, very powerful examples, those very powerful case studies throughout an organization to build that momentum. And, that helps get buy-in for, further literacy and innovation. I'm trying to remember, I think it was Carly that asked the question earlier in the chat. Okay, last but not least, Paul, what would your 30-day move be?
I would ponder on that a little bit, but I guess because we're here today, I think my 30-day move for myself and maybe for everyone on this call would be to just share more across industries. Because if I can learn about your 5 things, I don't need to do those 5 things for myself, fundamentally, or as much of them. And how would I know that worked? I guess I'd understand any new risks that we could identify and quantify. I'd understand any new ideas or opportunities that have surfaced. I'd learn about successful experiments with tangible outcomes, and I'd learn lessons which might enable a decision which could be, I don't know, stop, start, continue, or even just pivot. And I think if we all do that, then we multiplex our capability, maximize our resource, and we all move further together. Happens a lot in the non-profit space, but there's 20 people on this call today, and if we all shared one thing, we've got 20 outcomes from projects. Is kind of where I was going with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost the perfect segue for me to say, at the end of this call, we are absolutely delighted to share the 3rd iteration of that AI pulse check that we referenced right at the very start of this call. For the first time ever, this is not gated content. You do not need to give your email address, your name, to be able to get access to the report. So in the spirit of sharing information and knowledge and learnings and insights, and this report includes, we've got some talking heads. I think, Addie, you feature in the report as well. You're giving a little example, which is amazing. But please do take time to go through that report. Reach out to any of our panelists today, to us at Three-Sided Cube, should you have any questions. But yeah, I think within an hour of this, with this webinar finishing, those of you that have joined us today and that watch this on repeat, on record, you will be getting a one-page summary, and in that summary will be the link to the AI report that we've given a nod to today. But thank you so much to you three wonderful humans, you amazing panelists, not only to you guys individually, but also to your organizations for allowing you the time to be here today and share your amazing knowledge, insight, experience with us. And I'm not sure if you're on LinkedIn, but if any of you are watching or like I say, watch this on record, please do reach out to them on LinkedIn, give them a follow, give them a like, and know that you can reach out to us here at Three-Sided Cube, whether that's holler@threesidedcube.com or simply puff@threesidedcube.com. But yeah, watch out for that email follow-up within the next hour. And thank you so much for those of you at home taking the time to watch this today. Thank you.